Hi everyone and welcome to Design Unlocked, a weekly showcase of 2020 graduates from the University of Dundee and Abertay University. Today's session is being hosted and organised by members of V&A Dundee's Young People's Collective. So we have Noah, and we also have Gareth.
Yeah.
And I'm Lizzie.
So we'll start by telling you a little bit about what we do and introduce today's graduate to you all. V&A Dundee is the first ever dedicated design museum in Scotland and the only other V&A museum in the world outside of London. The museum provides a lot of place for inspiration, discovery and learning, and its mission is to enrich our lives through design. The Young People's Collective, or YPC as we know it, was formed in 2017, a whole year before the museum opened to the public. Our group ranges between 14 and 24 years, and we meet every day on Thursday throughout the year and get involved with lots of co-design processes and consult with the museum on key decisions. We represent the young people's voice. Over the past 3 years, we've led different kinds of projects and programs. Before we had a museum building, we started meeting weekly off-site to discuss what future programs for young people should include. We co-designed the V&A Dundee's opening 3D festival concert alongside a light and sound installation, all in the heart of the city. Since then, we've gone on to test and curate the events delivered for, and sometimes by young people. And we're interpreting themes within the museum spaces and exhibitions in ways that are relevant and interesting to us. Our group doesn't attend a program that has been decided for us by someone else. We contribute to our ideas together and design our program to make it work for us.
So Design Unlocked is a series of discussions with 2020 graduates from Abertay University and the University of Dundee that have been chosen by YPC to elaborate on their practice. So we wanted to give designers a space to showcase their practice, elaborate on their digital degree show presentations, because some design projects are especially challenging to display on digital platforms. So hopefully this conversation will allow a continued dialogue and let us learn about each designer's process in their own voices.
Amazing. So today's designer is Naomi Cairns, a product design graduate from the University of Dundee. Welcome, Naomi.
Hello.
Naomi has a passion for designing with people in mind. She wants to create products and experiences that help improve the daily lives of people. For the degree show, Naomi's project aimed to allow people to connect with one another through colour without words, constructing a Bluetooth device, allowing people to communicate creatively at a distance. Welcome, Naomi. It's amazing to have you along today. We'll get started by asking you some introductory questions and then move into more specific ones about your practice and projects.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay, so just to start off, what does a day in the life look like for you currently, Naomi? Like, what's your process?
So currently I'm doing my master's, so it's a lot of design thinking, a lot of prototyping and sketching and making. Obviously, I'm working from home a lot, so it's a lot of trial and error and making sure that I can get all my work done. A lot of lectures right now, which is always fun. So yeah, it's kind of a bit busy with all the uni stuff I've got to do, and while also continuing to kind of look into my honours project to see how I can develop it further.
To that end, how have you had to adapt your processes during the lockdown?
So originally, I mean, I was obviously making my honours project from home for most of it, and I didn't actually have a workspace at home, so I had to make myself a workspace. That started off with me kind of taking over the living room, making sure like I had a place that I can kind of play around in and use to kind of experiment with everything. So I've had to kind of adapt in a sense of like I wasn't always the most social person in my studio, but now I'm like I know the importance of like kind of reaching out to everybody, being like, right guys, what do you think of this and what do you think of that? Because you don't have that when you're working on your own anymore. So it's kind of like having a nice place to work, but also being able to be like, right, you need to talk to people, because that's the kind of best way to design things, getting people's feedback. And yeah, so a lot of kind of like trial and error to find like the best way of working for you in that kind of space. But yeah, it's mostly like working from home, trying to figure out the best way to work, because every project's different. So my last project, I had to go into the studio like once a week or something, just so I could have that kind of make space I don't have here, whereas most of the time I can just work at home quite freely. So yeah.
Have you got a good routine working?
No. I wish I did. I write down everything I need to do each day. Whether or not I get it done is a different story, but then I know what I can do the next again day or the day after. Usually it's just like, right, what can I do here and what can I not do here, and then kind of like navigating my way through it to know this is the best way to work and this isn't the best way to work, and knowing when to kind of divide my spaces up. Initially, when I started working from home, I was just working in my living room, and I knew if I would just worked in my living room that way, nowhere else in my flat was like I wasn't going to do any work anywhere else. Whereas since I've moved to working in my room, it's a bit harder because I'm not dividing my living space and my workspace. So it's kind of like creating a good divide and kind of like trialing and erroring through it to make sure you've got a good kind of like work-life balance.
Totally. I guess that process links in really nicely to sort of like understanding more about what the story and inspiration behind your degree show project was, and sort of how you got to your final outcome.
So I started thinking of ideas for my project during the summer before I started my fourth year. Every time I had an idea, I would just kind of like note it down, thinking like, how can I build on this? What kind of purpose would this serve? And then eventually, when I started, we had like a kind of presentation where we were like, okay, these are all our ideas. We got a wee bit of feedback on it. And then from that, I kind of just looked into my key area of interest, which was mental health at the time. So I looked into different types of mental illnesses and different things that everybody experiences with these. And then I narrowed it down to three key areas that I wanted to look at. And one of them was loneliness, because loneliness is a global issue. You don't have to have a mental illness to experience it. So I started researching into loneliness a lot more, doing a lot of research into books, films, different documentaries and things like that. And then eventually I kind of started narrowing it down from there into like something to do with communication, mostly because you don't want to create something that's just solely focused like, hey, you're lonely, like do something about it. Whereas it's like encouraging conversation is a lot like accessible and a lot easier to kind of like market and talk about. So I kind of like worked my way through a lot of different things to get to where I got to, basically.
That's really interesting. I think it goes well into the next question about who would you say your influences are? Like, do you have a favorite creative, like a favorite designer or an artist or anything like that that sort of really inspired this project, or just you in general?
For this project, since I did a lot of research and my dissertation linked somewhat to it, I looked into a professor called Sherry Turkle, who talks about a lot about connection and loneliness and things like that. So on the kind of like psychological side, I kind of focused into that kind of element, not necessarily looking at creatives in a sense, but a lot into kind of like professionals and of like sciencey type stuff to do with like human psychology. My design influences are actually quite architectural kind of people, so I really like Frank Gehry and the Hadid. I really like the kind of like fluid movements of their work, and a lot of my past work kind of mirrored some of their elements, whereas now I'm kind of focused more on kind of simple things and simple shapes. But yeah, it's kind of like a good mix usually.
Do you have any advice for people looking to go into product design like you are?
I think it's about keeping an open mind and thinking like, obviously everybody uses things differently and everyone experiences day-to-day life completely differently. So it's having an open mind and knowing that you can obviously look into your own particular area of interest, which is always really interesting, and you don't have to focus on the things that you may not be as good at. But it's always like having that kind of perseverance and knowing that, like, okay, like design stuff is really interesting anyway. You've got so much to kind of learn, and you've got so much to kind of like inspire you. So it's really cool to get into, but also knowing like it can become quite technical depending on what route you go down, and just being like, okay, this may not work right now, but it might work later. So it's like being able to come back and forth between ideas and knowing how everything might come together at the end, or it might not, but that's totally okay. So I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully.
What surprised you? I mean, was there anything really different from what you imagined when you went into product design?
Initially, when I went into product design, I only really thought about like how something works. I didn't really think about why it worked the way it did, which is something that greatly interests me now. I'm more interested in why something does the thing it does than how it does it. So I'd rather know like why we have an object rather than what it does. So like, why do we have those lights that we can just like power on by our voice? Why do we have those? Instead of just like, why do they work the way they do? So why do we have those? Those are my kind of like big questions, like how we as people need, like we want certain things, and because of that they get created. But it's always something that's really interests me. So that's something that I wasn't really expecting to get into as much as I did.
So you would say sort of your understanding of what design is has changed over the years that you've been studying it, because that's something I've realised myself studying the same course. So would you sort of agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. It's like this understanding has went way up. So before I was just accepted things as the way they were, but now I'm like more willing to question it.
I guess sort of continuing that vein, it's nice to sort of get into the more specifics of your sort of degree show design. And so with that in mind, why was it that you chose colour to be the thing transmitted between your devices?
I went through quite a lot of different ideas before that. I was thinking about sound, words itself, like texting, and like drawings and things like that. One of my main goals before using colour was having two linked devices where you can draw a picture on one or on the other. And then I realised I wasn't as good at technology to do that. Like I wasn't good enough to do that. I knew that at the start. Because I've only started learning how to code and things for uni, so I didn't have enough experience to be able to do something like that. So I looked more into colour and things like that because colour is quite personal, and there's a lot of like medical research based on colour and how colour can affect your mood. So it was something that I found really interesting, and I knew based on my previous research that some people can find it quite overwhelming to use words and trying to text or alliterate how they're feeling. So having something like colour where you can go out or you can just scan something around you and then send it off, and it's something that can prompt a conversation without having to be like, hey, give me attention please. It's more of a, hi, look at this colour. What do you think about it? Maybe you'll get back to me. Maybe you'll question the colour. Maybe you'll be like, I know exactly what that means. It's kind of like personal between the person who's sending it and the person who's receiving it. They might create their own little code so they know what colour means what, or it may be completely up to like prompts and that. So basically trying to get back to the person being like, oh, how are you today? Or, oh, you want to chat or something like that, without having to necessarily go out and be like, please talk to me. So yeah.
It's not as forward or aggressive, I guess, in that way. Then it's a much more like chill,
Yeah,
immersive
it's like
way.
quite passive. Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I love the way that your product sort of rethinks how people communicate or suggests another way of communicating other than like an instant message or something like that. I really like that about it.
Thank you.
Well, I was wondering, products are quite often used for things they weren't intended to. And I know it's hard to tell, but do you think there might be other ways that this could be used?
Possibly, yeah. It could be used as something like a notification tool for friends, being like, "Oh, I'm in the house right now. You can like come chat with me," or something. Or it could be something just being like, no, maybe something for like a family member, so you can just send them a colour and they know you got home safely, or something like that. So there could be like a few different other uses that it could potentially fill in, maybe.
Again, I guess it's a little bit of a tangent idea, but actually that conversation just made me think your device would be amazing sort of in an elderly community. Somewhere like my nana, for example, uses a button device that she keeps on her in case she falls, and it's connected to a system. But that's like the only thing she can use because it's one button. She really
Yeah.
can't use mobile devices and anything other than a landline she's baffled by. So something like this actually, again, is a simple one button sort of idea, but it is maybe a bit more personal than a big red button for emergency
Yeah.
sort of thing.
I mean, I'm actually doing a project right now which is based on disability and things like that. So right now I'm designing something for someone who's visually impaired, and I'm thinking about using like RFID technology and sound. So not necessarily having to press anything, just putting something down and then it does something, like makes a noise or makes a colour. Well, not won't make a colour, but it does something like that. So it kind of this kind of idea is kind of like elevated and escalated. So my last project, I used RFID and sound, like music and stuff like that, and it's a very like sister project to this one, which is kind of cool. So it's like it kind of like keeps on like escalating and evolving into something more, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's great. You never really know where your product's going to end up. But yeah, how does mental health connect to this project? And if you're comfortable discussing any personal connections to it, why did this become a point of reference to you for this project?
So initially for me, during the summer and stuff, I kept on noting down ideas that I had, and a lot of them were to do with mental health. I myself deal with like mental illnesses, so I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm kind of used to like different methods of helping and things like that, so I know different techniques and stuff I could use myself that would help. And I'm quite not like clued up on different symptoms and different things that other people might experience because of that. And I know quite a lot of people with different mental illnesses. So that kind of started off as a starting point, thinking, okay, how can I create something that might help people who don't feel comfortable necessarily talking about how they're feeling? And then I was thinking about having like an AI assistant that would help kind of like even notify your family members if you're feeling especially low and you just don't have the kind of capacity to be like reach out. So it kind of started from there, and then after researching and thinking about how accessible and how people would want to interact with something like that, that's how it kind of evolved into something further, because it's kind of difficult for people to, like, some people don't necessarily want to admit that they're feeling a bit low, or they don't want other people to know. So having something that's more focused on connecting people through a passive means is something what I felt like was more acceptable and more light-hearted than something that kind of screams like, I need somebody right now. It's more of a, hey, like, I'm here. If you want to talk, if you don't want to talk, it's fine. And obviously colour itself can be quite expressive as to how somebody's feeling, how someone's not feeling. So usually, like, we all associate certain colours with certain moods. So like blue can be sad, yellow can be really happy. So it kind of just evolves from how can I get people to kind of reach out, or others to kind of realise, okay, maybe I should reach out to this person, into something that's more passive but more kind of like usable and more well, easier to kind of like fit your needs than something that only fits one need.
That's really interesting. That's fantastic. Thank you.
I'm just wondering, because it's such an emotional product, how would you market this product? Like you said, it's the why of the product.
Yeah. This was obviously the challenging part because I didn't necessarily want to market it for mental health, and I didn't really want to market it as something for loneliness. As I kind of progressed my product, I knew which kind of words to kind of drop from my brief and stuff like that, because I knew less people would want to interact with it if they were like, oh, it's only for this purpose. So it's more right now I kind of market it at like something for people who want to connect, but they don't necessarily want to use words, so more like a passive connection.
I guess in that vein, did you ever have an image for like the packaging of it, or sort of, you know, how would it sit on a shelf? Would it be in the tech aisle? Would it be in the? It wouldn't be in the fruit and veg aisle, but you know, did you have an image in your head?
I think I think that started coming after I actually had finished the project. When I was talking with the family members, thinking, okay, how would I be able to like kind of get this out there? Would it be something that would go through the NHS for someone who is more like chronically lonely, or would it be something where it's like a set of devices come packaged together, and you give a set to your friend, and then you have a set, and they're all connected? So it's kind of like there's different ways it could have been, or could be technically. So it could be one of those things that sit next to the phones in the tech aisle, or it could be something that the NHS is like, maybe you need like something to like communicate with your friend, but not necessarily texting or whatever. More something where you can just scan something around you, something colourful, and then send it off, and then you know you've at least attempted to make that kind of connection for yourself today. Yeah.
I guess leading on from that really nicely and sort of continuing this sort of vein of conversation, your prototype relies on Bluetooth to communicate between the devices. Obviously, that distance can't be too great just based on the technology of Bluetooth itself.
Yeah.
Are you continuing to sort of develop the concept? Have you considered, if it was to, you know, in a fabulous ideal world, like be nationwide, like how would the devices communicate with each other?
Yeah, so I started thinking about that again after I kind of like made my prototypes and stuff, like so I knew Bluetooth wasn't going to be like the most ideal technology to use, but that's all I knew how to use at the time when I was making it. So it was kind of like not knowing, I'm still kind of researching into it because I have no idea what technology I would use right now. So right now I've been playing around with RFID technology, which wouldn't do the same thing, I know that. And I've also been considering, like, could it be an app instead? So having it on your phone, and instead of, you know, scanning it via an actual physical like device, having like your phone scan something. Having your phone scan something. So like picking up your phone, just like scanning something around you, and then sending it off, and then for that other person who receives it, their phone just randomly turns a completely different color. So no matter what they're doing, they just get like a random like full screen color on their phone. So it kind of distracts them for a moment, and they're like, oh, I wonder what this is. So I was thinking maybe that's probably the more plausible solution, like having an app-based thing rather than devices. And again, that would make it a lot more accessible than physical objects.
That's kind of cool. It gives me vibes back to the use of Blackberries. Did you ever, when you had a Blackberry phone, like pick a specific color for someone so it would flash a specific color? That gives me that kind of, it's really nice and kind of nostalgic for, I guess, people our ages.
Well, we've heard a lot about the ideas and the story behind it, but would we actually be able to see the prototype itself?
Yeah, I'll just need to plug it in, so you guys are going to hear a really weird noise right now when I try and plug everything in. This is the little scanning device, and it picks up on anything you scan. So right now it's scanning me, and I'm like a pinky colour or a yellowy colour right now, so it will scan me. But if I scan something like this, because I have nice little colour sheets, so this is like a purpley colour, I know on camera it might not look as purple as it is, but so it'll scan that, and then it'll appear up here, so it's kind of like a purpley colour, and then that sends to the other device, so this will appear purple.
I really like the shapes. How did you come up with the physical object? Because that, to me anyway, is a really big part of what you've invented.
So this device is kind of like I take on the kind of eyedropper tool. So instead of having it look like a proper like pipette tool that you'd use in like biology or something, I kind of took the simplified form. So it's kind of just like, it's almost kind of like a dropper tool for like a map or something. And the other device, I played a lot with different forms and different shapes to see which ones I liked. And it went through like a lot of different reinventions basically until I found a shape that I kind of liked and kind of didn't look too much like a lamp, because that was always a big issue. A lot of them kind of looked like lamps and stuff like that, and it's not what I wanted. I wanted it more to be like a kind of notification tool. And then I also played around with like using fabrics and stuff, so I made this kind of like fabric cake thing for it. This was kind of too big and kind of made it a lot more complicated than it needed to be. So,
Do you have any sketch models hanging around we could see?
not sketch models, unfortunately. Those I lost a long time ago. But I do have like a lot of sketches and stuff like that to do with it. So, kind of like variations of kind of like forms and things like that. So it's it was like a lot of trial and error. So this one mostly focuses on the form for the sending device. I was thinking about different shapes and different forms for that. And then gradually it just got into a lot more chaotic, trying to figure out the receiving device. So it was a lot of sketches and CAD models to get to there. So, yeah.
I guess the link through all of those examples are like everything's very ergonomic and smooth and kind of like aesthetically pleasing. They're all things that you kind of want to like stroke because they look soft in that way. Like,
I mean, one of the things I actually found, like when I was researching for the project and I was looking at different examples and things like that, was things that are curved are more like you want to interact with it a bit more because it's safer than something that's really like spiky and things like that. So you're like, okay, I can touch this. This is safe to use.
no, that's like all super interesting, Naomi, and thank you so much for spending the time to talk to us and talk through that project and the whole process really from sketches to fruition and a real physical object. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Noah and
Thanks
Gareth.
for having me.
Oh, thank you. Noah, Gareth, do you guys have any sort of final thanks or thoughts?
I mean, I just say as someone that's now in their final year of doing product design, it's good to hear from someone that's graduated. It's just I don't know, it's just inspiring to hear from you. That's all I have to say.
From someone in the third year, it's again reassuring to see the long game, the bigger picture, and what you're doing after uni year, or at least bachelor's year.
Yeah, for our viewers watching, thank you so much for watching and engaging with the Design Unlocked series. YPC have done an amazing job putting this together and collating for fantastic designers to talk to. If you've not seen the whole series, it is now all on Instagram TV and will soon be on YouTube. So do keep an eye out for it, check it out, have a look at the other designers featured. But for now, we'll see you next time on the next YPC programming. Thanks so much. Bye.